Austin Brown stood backstage at the Dolby Theater in Los Angeles, holding his weathered guitar close to his chest as though it were the only thing keeping him standing. The stagehands bustled around, producers whispered cues into headsets, and the bright AGT sign glowed in the distance. Yet, Austin's eyes were somewhere else entirely, caught in the memory of a dimly lit bar, the clinking of glasses, and the bittersweet burn of whiskey that had nearly cost him everything. He wasn't just here to sing. He was here to pour his soul into a story that had haunted him for years. The song he had written, Whiskey, wasn't crafted for fame, or even for music charts. It was born out of his darkest nights, when the amber liquid in a glass seemed like a friend, and later, like a prison. The other contestants looked at him, curious. Most had makeup artists, stylists, or family cheering them on. Austin stood alone, adjusting the strap of his guitar with shaky fingers. His lean frame carried the weight of sleepless nights and years of struggle. Yet, when a stagehand asked if he was ready, his reply was steady. Yeah. It's time. The curtain parted, and the roar of the crowd surged into his ears. Under the blinding lights, Austin walked across the stage, his boots echoing on the polished floor. He looked at the judges, Simon Cowell, Sofia Vergara, Heidi Klum, and Howie Mandel, all watching, curious about the quiet man with tired eyes. "What's your name?" Simon asked. "Austin Brown," he said softly. "What are you singing for us tonight?" Heidi leaned forward. "It's an original song," Austin replied, his voice catching slightly. "It's called Whiskey. It's my story." The audience fell silent. The name of the song alone carried weight. Simon gave him a small nod, as if sensing the gravity of the moment. Austin took a deep breath, placed his fingers on the guitar strings, and closed his eyes. The theater dimmed, and in that instant, the world outside ceased to exist. The first note drifted out like smoke curling from a burning log, slow, haunting, raw. The audience leaned in, caught immediately by the soulful timbre of Austin's voice. Whiskey on my lips, burning down the truth I couldn't face. His voice cracked, not from lack of control, but from a depth of emotion so real it shook the air. He sang of nights alone at kitchen tables, staring at the bottom of an empty glass. Of promises broken. Of apologies that came too late. You were the fire in my veins. But you stole my yesterdays. People in the crowd began to tear up. A woman in the front row gripped her husband's hand tighter. A young man in the balcony, who had been struggling with his own demons, sat straighter, his eyes wide as though Austin were speaking directly to him. The judges were no different. Sophia covered her mouth, visibly moved. Heidi leaned forward, eyes glassy. Even Simon, known for his hardened demeanor, was frozen in concentration, his brow furrowed, as if he was not just listening to a performance, but being led into someone's confession. Austin's voice carried the weight of redemption and ruin all at once. His guitar strummed with a raw simplicity that made the words even more powerful. There was no band, no backing track, just a man and his truth. The song built into a chorus that swelled like a storm. Whiskey, you ain't my friend. You took her love, you left me with sin. But tonight, I'm setting you down. And I won't let you drown me again. On that note, Austin's voice cracked in a way that wasn't technical, it was human. It was the sound of a man clawing his way out of the dark, one lyric at a time. The crowd erupted mid-song, clapping, cheering, but he didn't break. His eyes remained closed, as if he were still sitting in that lonely room, strumming for no one but himself. Halfway through the performance, Austin faltered. Not in his playing, but in his composure. His voice trembled as he reached the bridge. He could see her face in his mind, the woman he had lost to his drinking. Her laughter, her disappointment, her tears the night she walked out, whispering, "I can't do this anymore, Austin." He almost stopped. His hand froze on the strings for a fraction of a second. The audience noticed. The judges noticed. It was as though the memory had punched the air out of him. But then, he took a shaky breath and pressed forward. I buried my sorrow in a bottle. But it only dug me deeper in the ground. His voice rose, raspy but unyielding. The theater vibrated with the sheer honesty in his words. People weren't just hearing a song, they were feeling his war, his shame, his fragile hope. By the final chorus, the entire crowd was on their feet. Some clapped along gently, others just stood in silence, tears rolling down their cheeks. The words were no longer just Austin's. They belonged to everyone who had ever lost a piece of themselves to something they couldn't control. "Whiskey, you ain't my friend," he sang one last time, letting the note linger until it felt like the walls themselves were holding their breath. When the last chord fell into silence, Austin lowered his guitar and stared at the floor. The weight of the moment pressed down on him. For a terrifying second, he thought the world wouldn't understand, that maybe his pain was too much, too raw. Then came the sound, thunderous applause, cheers, shouts of his name. The wave of love hit him so hard that tears spilled from his eyes before he could stop them. The applause seemed endless, but eventually the room quieted enough for Simon to speak. He leaned forward, his voice softer than usual. "Austin," he began, his tone unusually careful, "I've heard thousands of auditions on this stage. Thousands. But what you just did, that wasn't just a song. That was your life, wasn't it?" Austin swallowed hard, nodding. "Yeah. It was me. All of it." The crowd murmured, hanging on his every word. I wrote it in the middle of, in the middle of losing everything," Austin continued, his voice trembling. "I thought the bottle was the only thing that understood me. But all it did was take away the people I loved most. This song, it's the only way I know how to make sense of it. To try and let go." Sophia wiped her tears, shaking her head in awe. "That was so powerful. You made us all feel your story. You gave us your heart tonight." Howie leaned into his mic. "Austin, you're not just a singer, you're a survivor. And that's why this performance is going to stay with people long after tonight." Then it was Simon's turn again. He looked at Austin with something rare in his eyes, respect. "Austin, sometimes music is about hitting the perfect note. And sometimes it's about telling the truth, no matter how ugly, no matter how painful. You did that tonight. And I promise you, people all over the world are going to hear this and know they're not alone." The audience erupted again, chanting, "Austin! Austin! Austin!" Austin's hands trembled on the guitar. For years he had sung into the void, playing to empty rooms, thinking no one cared. Tonight, the world cared. Backstage, after the performance, Austin leaned against the wall, trying to catch his breath. He still couldn't quite believe what had happened out there. Contestants passed by, patting him on the back, some whispering, "That was incredible," others simply nodding, eyes full of quiet admiration. A producer handed him a water bottle, and he laughed softly at the irony. He didn't need whiskey anymore. Austin pulled out his phone and scrolled through unread messages. His heart skipped when he saw one from her, the woman he thought he'd lost forever. It wasn't long, just a single line. "I saw you tonight. I'm proud of you." His hands shook as he read it over and over. In that moment, it wasn't about winning AGT. It wasn't about record deals or fame. It was about redemption. About finally being seen, not as the man he used to be, but the man he was becoming. Weeks later, when the performance aired on television, Austin's song, "Whiskey," went viral overnight. People around the world flooded social media with stories of their own struggles, with addiction, heartbreak, and redemption. His lyrics became more than a song, they became an anthem of survival. Austin returned to the AGT stage in the finals, but even then, he knew he had already won. Not the trophy, not the $1 million, but something far greater. He had won back himself.